Welcome everyone to the first Gcore AI news show. I'm Harry Verity, tech journalist and AI consultant. This is a new venture for us, so we'd love to hear your feedback in the comments about what we can do differently. Today, we're diving into two of the biggest AI stories of 2025. The simultaneous release of GPT-5 and OpenAI's first open source model since GPT-2, GPT OSS. For business leaders trying to decide between API calls and running your own AI infrastructure, this changes everything. We're talking about a 120 billion parameter reasoning model that you can run on your own servers with no rate limits, complete data privacy, and Apache 2.0 licensing. Today, I'm going to be showing you exactly how GPT-5's new features stack up against GPT OSS, and we're also going to be demoing how to deploy GPT OSS on Gcore in under 5 minutes. We'll also be revealing why this might be the most secure AI solution for your business. And of course, it goes without saying, we'll also be talking about them both and giving them a test run. So without further ado, let's get into it. First then, GPT-5. Released on the 7th of August, it's a fundamental shift in how OpenAI approaches AI models, with reasoning front and center of everything it does, rather than reasoning being handled by a separate model. Let's break down some of the key features. GPT-5 uses a real-time router that automatically chooses between GPT-5 main for quick queries and GPT-5 thinking for complex reasoning. As Professor Ethan Mollock pointed out on LinkedIn, for consumers using ChatGPT, this is a genuine breakthrough because it makes reasoning accessible. Almost nobody, that's less than 1% of free users, was actually using O3's expensive reasoning model. Do note that in the API, there is no auto router, but that means you can select both the model and how much the model reasons for the very first time. Minimal reasoning is a new option. It uses very few but no reasoning tokens. Low uses very basic reasoning. Medium, of course, is the default reasoning level. And high is the maximum reasoning depth. Here's something crucial for business applications, the new verbosity parameter. You can set it to low, medium, or high, independent of reasoning effect. So this means you can have high reasoning with concise outputs, which is perfect for status updates, or low reasoning with detailed explanations for documentation. So the bottom line is then that high reasoning and low verbosity is the smartest cost optimization. You get the best model thinking, but you pay less for final response length. High verbosity can also avoid the kind of militaristic bullet point answers that O3 would give by default, even to very complex questions. GPT-5 on the API has 272,000 dedicated input tokens and 128,000 dedicated output tokens, so a combined context window of 400,000. That's roughly 200,000 words of input, enough for most business documents without having to resort to chunking or RAG. GPT OSS, by comparison, has 128,000 tokens combined. Remember GPT-4's overly flattering responses that got rolled back? GPT-5 addresses that with what OpenAI calls safe completions, trying to be helpful within safety guidelines rather than just refusing requests outright. It's well worth reading through the system card in detail if you want to know more about how this works. It's fair to say GPT-5's launch was bumpy. Sam Altman admitted the auto switcher in ChatGPT made the model seem way dumber for parts of the day. OpenAI had to bring back legacy models after user complaints. The benchmarks are impressive though: 94.6% on AIM 2025 mathematics, 84.2% on multimodal understanding, and crucially for businesses, OpenAI claimed 45% fewer hallucinations with web search enabled. Let's see how this stacks up to OpenAI's open source model. GPT OSS isn't just any open source model, it's OpenAI's first since GPT-2 in 2019. And it's a reasoning model. According to OpenAI, GPT OSS 120 billion parameter model achieves nearly piety with OpenAI's O4 Mini. There are two different models for two different use cases. GPT OSS 120 billion parameter model has only 5.1 billion active tokens thanks to their mixture of experts architecture. It fits nicely onto a single 80GB GPU like an H100. When we compare that to the 20 billion smaller model, that has just 3.6 billion active tokens. And that runs in just 16GB of memory, so your gaming rig could handle this. So why did OpenAI decide to release an open source model? I think that there are three reasons. First, competitive pressure. Think about models like DeepSeek V3 and Qwen 3. Second, Regulatory requirements. If you think about it, many enterprises need on-premises or on-cloud AI for compliance, but until now there just wasn't an option to do this with OpenAI's models, even though they are the market leader. This makes it a game changer for big businesses that want to run on OpenAI's tried and tested models with full compliance and data privacy. Third, I think it's actually strategic. By open sourcing the 120 billion parameter model, they're still keeping GPT-5 as the premium offering. Now let's dive into some of the technical specs. The open source models come with an Apache 2.0 license, completely permissive MXFP4 quantization for efficiency, a 128K context window. This is smaller than GPT-5 but still substantial. Full chain of thought reasoning visible, native tool calling and structured outputs, and adjustable reasoning effort low, medium and high. GPT OSS has 120 billion parameters and it achieves near parity with GPT's O4 Mini. Independent evaluations from artificial analysis show GPT OSS 120 billion parameter model is the most intelligent American open weights model, trailing only DeepSeek R1 and Qwen 3 in raw intelligence, but offering significant efficiency advantages. But here's the key question: how easy is this to get off the ground? Let me show you exactly how easy it is to get GPT OSS running. So I'm using Gcore Everywhere Inference platform with H100s for the best output. First, we need to go through some setup. So sign up for a Gcore account. We have a startup program with credits if you qualify. Next, we need to navigate to Everywhere Inference. So from the dashboard, select Everywhere Inference. This is Gcore's managed AI platform. Now we need to select the model. So scroll through the model catalog until you see GPT OSS. This is crucial. Make sure you select the 120 billion parameter model, not the 20 billion parameter model, if you want maximum performance. Now we need to make sure we have the correct hardware setup. Select at least an H100 chip. And finally, we want to set up the all-important API. So we want to create your API key, and this of course will be your authentication token. Hit deploy and wait. This typically takes 3 to 5 minutes to spin up. Gcore provides both a web interface for testing and REST API endpoints. Let's test it with a complex reasoning task. Perfect. You can see the full chain of thought reasoning and response times are really good. So you can of course grab this endpoint and integrate it into any application. Slack bots, Google Sheet scripts, custom web apps. I'm going to show you how you do a Google Sheets integration later. Alright, let's talk about some business use cases. So this is where GPT OSS comes really compelling for businesses. No rate limits means no unexpected throttling during peak usage. If you're using Claude for coding tasks, you probably hit those frustrating rate limits. We tested GPT OSS 120 billion parameter model against Claude Code for building a simple landing page and completed it within a few minutes without a single rate limit interruption. Now here's a really interesting and practical business use case: lead generation and web research. With a simple Google Apps script, you can integrate GPT OSS directly into Google Sheets for bulk URL analysis, company research, or content generation. This is perfect for GTM engineering teams who need to process hundreds of prospects or research targets. Instead of paying per API call, you're paying for compute time at fixed hourly rates. And if you're using specialized sales tech tools like Clay, you can also set this up as a simple API request using the endpoint provided, so long as you have the $350 Explorer plan, which allows integration with any HTTP API. Let's compare some of these key technical stats. First of all, let's talk about the context window. GPT-5 has 272,000 input tokens and 128,000 output tokens. So that's a 400,000 context window combined. We can compare that with GPT OSS, 120 billion parameter model, which has 128,000 context window combined, and Claude 4, which has 200,000 context window. GPT-5 wins on raw context size, but 128,000 is still enough for most businesses. Remember, GPT-4 had 128,000 context window. Let's talk about reasoning capabilities. Both GPT-5 and GPT OSS support adjustable reasoning effort, but GPT OSS gives you full visibility into the chain of thought process. This is huge for debugging and building trust in AI decisions. Safety and compliance is also obviously a big issue. GPT OSS includes the same safety training as OpenAI's proprietary models. They even tested adversely fine-tuned versions and confirmed it doesn't reach high-risk capability levels under their preparedness framework. This is big, and it gives big businesses a lot more peace of mind and security over running some of the Chinese models like DeepSeek or Alibaba's Qwen 3 coding model. Deployment flexibility is also another thing. With GPT-5, of course, you have your API only, and it's subject to OpenAI's policies. With GPT OSS, you can deploy this anywhere, on-premises, edge devices, or even your own cloud. For heavily regulated industries like healthcare, finance, or government, this control is non-negotiable. So, when should you choose each option? Choose GPT OSS, the open source model, if you need data privacy and control, you're hitting those rate limits pretty hard, you're processing high volumes, or you're in regulated industries, or perhaps you want to fine-tune for very specific demands. Of course, the situation is not black and white either. Most people can use a hybrid approach, so using GPT-5's APIs for quick queries and prototyping, and then moving to the open source model for production workloads and for sensitive data processing. So here's the bigger picture. This release fundamentally changes the AI landscape. For the first time since GPT-2, we have a truly capable open source model from OpenAI, and it can compete with their commercial offerings. This democratizes AI access, and it gives businesses real alternatives to vendor lock-in, but it also opens up OpenAI to a host of industries that previously had to rely on Metaslama or some of those more risky Chinese models for deployment. GPT OSS represents the biggest shift in enterprise AI deployment since the original ChatGPT release. Whether you choose GPT-5's cutting-edge capabilities or GPT OSS's control and cost advantages, the key is understanding your specific use case and volume requirements. So, I'm super curious to hear, what is your biggest AI deployment challenge? Drop me a comment below. I read all of them, and you never know, we might get around to turning one of them into a future video. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one. But before you go, make sure you do me a big favor. If you've watched this far into the video, then don't forget to like and subscribe. It can really help the channel to grow. See you next time.